Hi, Pam.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you for being patient.
No problem. We were just afraid that we had missed something important.
I am so glad you're ready. That's exciting. Okay, so I have you and education and outreach and um help me remember who else. There are
Yeah, it looks like
four of us.
everybody. We've got John Perotti, and then education and outreach is Alba, I suspect.
Okay, I want to promote John to I want to promote John to um that's interesting. Why can't we promote John to be a panelist? I can make him a host. Let's see if John can be a host. Hi.
Hey,
Hi. I'm waiting to see if I can promote you to be a host, John. I don't know why. Let's see, Alba. Okay. Oh, good. Yeah, you should be a host now. Let's see. Okay, 4 panelists. That's good. I think you're all panelists. Is that correct? Okay, and you should be able to share screens. Unfortunately, attendees can hear us. I apologize, attendees. We're just getting ourselves organized here.
Hey Pam, this is Alba, or Education and Outreach. I still don't have a host.
Okay, I am now promoting you to panelists, Alba. See what your features tell you now.
I think I'm host now.
Okay, so why do we have 5 panelists? We shouldn't have 5 panelists. Let's see. Those are too many.
it looks like I'm not a host.
Oh, you should be a panelist, John. That's what I'm looking for. Oh, here we go. Interestingly, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, good. And so there we go. Okay, I believe, John, you should be a panelist. See what how you're identified. See if you have the option to share your screen.
I do. Yes, I do.
Okay, so we're all set. I think we have our 4 panelists. And now I recommend we all mute ourselves and re-engage at 7 p.m. I think our practice session looks good. What I'll do next is take the screen to start my first screen share. So I'll do that, and then we'll just wait till 7 p.m. to begin.
Is there anything we wanted to test out really quick on our end, team?
That's fine. Yeah, you're welcome to test something. Let me just see if my situation works. I'm actually a little concerned that okay, share screen. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So let me just set up okay, great. Let's see if I can just get that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
couldn't pull off a second laptop, so I want to see if we could do that split.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So let's see if I can. Yeah, just let me know if you see. Do you happen to see on my screen? No. Is that showing the Golden Gate Audubon first screen? Okay, great. All right, so we're good there. Now, go ahead and share your screens. I'll just leave mine up and see, or maybe I have to exit. I have to stop share. Okay. All right, each of you can practice.
Okay. So I will try to share and see if I can do, if I do this. You just see my whole,
Great,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
perfect.
Minutes too. So it's, there we go.
So do you guys see the, this presenter thing with notes, or do you see the slides?
We see the presenter notes. So if that's if you were like editing.
Got it. You see that.
Mhm.
I got two things going on my screen. Like in the background is the full on presentation, but I got this little timer thing going, presenter view.
Oh, whoa, okay.
Do you see the, oh, you don't see that? Sweet.
Mm-mm. But at this, but we do, okay, I think we're on the same page, Isaiah, but we do see your speaker notes in the bottom. Does that make sense? Like, you know how
Oh,
when
you
you,
do?
yeah, like when you click on the side and then like we see everything. How about that?
How about now? Let me try this.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
It's just a different slide, but it's the same setup.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not seeing me, you don't see my notes or anything.
We do.
Oh boy. So you're seeing like two
Might
things
have to
going on.
go,
What's
you might have
that?
to go full presenter mode.
Got it.
The only other thing that you could try is going presenter mode, but then split screening. So like half of your screen and then opening a separate window. And I don't know if you only select the presentation window with your screen share, if you might still be able to see a separate screen.
Okay. Let's try that again. And then can I make that smaller?
It's full screen for us. We don't see the notes.
You don't?
Mm-mm.
Oh, we might be getting there.
Now it's on my screen, it's a little zoomed in.
Weird.
I have my other laptop on deck too, if we decide we need that.
We might, because it's, if that's not hard.
Yeah. Should I try to log in with the other
We
one?
can try. I'll try one more time. And see if
Yeah.
I can get to-
In the meantime, I'm gonna go get the charger for it, just in case.
So right now you just see the full thing, Isaiah?
Right now, yeah, I see just like the editing mode. So I can see all the notes underneath and like the slides along the left-hand column.
That's funny because my screen is the actual presentation, no notes.
So weird.
Yeah, so I'm like seeing the opposite of what we want. And if I go like this, does that change anything?
Not yet.
Okay. What if
Yeah, same.
another try? What do you see now?
Now it looks good. I see like the URL bar at the top, but otherwise it's like full slide and full
Got it.
format.
And if I go like that, does that change anything?
That like squishes the format and crops off part of the slide, and I still see the URL bar. So it's better before.
Okay, yeah, before I couldn't see any notes. So let's see if Alba's lucky.
Yeah, that might be our best bet.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries. It was worth a try. I'm going to do a quick edit or two to remove some automations just to make the slides a little easier to
Okay.
have someone else advance.
Yeah, I think there's some in my partner one that don't need to be there.
Yeah, there's a couple in those slides. One or two might even be Lego see from, but yeah, I'll just pull those out really quick. Do you want me to pull out yours too, John?
Sure.
Okay, let me see if I can do that all quick, like.
Damn it! This whole time I've been speaking. I'm gonna try it. I just gave y'all the secret of life while I was rambling. I'm gonna try it on my tablet. And worst comes to worst, I could just share slides and see how that goes. Let's see.
We could also trade off. Like worst case, we could stop share and start it back up.
Yeah.
So whoever needs to see notes is not sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is pretty weird. I was gonna try to remove those animations to just make it easier, and I can't even access that part of it. It's like locked.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can. It's not a big deal. I thought that might make it a little easier, but
That's weird. Yeah, it doesn't let you get into them.
no, isn't that super weird?
Oh, here's transit. Ooh, if you right click those, like that little stack of circles,
Uh-huh.
this transition thing came on.
I see that one too, but I think that's different. Object animations below, perhaps.
Yeah. Huh.
Okay. Here we go. Do you want me to take off those fly-ins for the partner
Sure.
slides? Okay.
Okay.
Going old school, y'all.
This feels very high tech when really I'm just like signing into my email. I'm like, I'm discovering something. All right, let's see.
That's a Zoom limitation that you can't, or at least I couldn't figure out how to see notes, but not have everybody see it.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunity for growth.
There we go.
Even Zoom. Oh boy. My roommate's home.
Okay, so
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, I think I pulled out all those animations.
Sweet.
Well, does everyone feel ready?
Let's see if Alba's feeling ready.
Because if it's all right, I'll put up my first slide and get ready.
so team, did we decide we'll alternate in sharing screen?
Would that be best? Is that iPad working or the?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Okay.
But I could kick us off and just share the screen. That's helpful.
Do you want to share and then we can flip at the when it hands off to you from Isaiah?
That sounds good. Yeah.
And Isaiah, either you could do it or I could do it. I'll just need some notes at the very end.
Sure, either way.
Do you want to try it? Just so then we don't have to flip a third time. And then if it doesn't work, I'll do it.
Oh, should I unshare? Here, I'll exit just a minute.
So Alba will share first, and then I'll share from my section, and yours then at the end, Alba. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, a part of me feels like I can do it without notes. No, I shouldn't do it without notes. Yeah.
Alba will do it until Isaiah's done, and then Isaiah will do it until we're done.
Yes.
Love it.
And
Sounds
John, tell
good.
me how to pronounce your last name. Is it Parodi?
You
Or-
got it.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. All righty. Well, I'm going to try to put up my, let's see. Oh, maybe that's, let me see. Share screen. Okay, great. Share. All right, everyone. Welcome to Golden Gate Audubon Society Speaker Series for November. Tonight, we're going to hear from 3 wonderful presenters from Point Blue. And the title of the presentation is Exploring Culturally Relevant Education and Climate Smart Restoration. Just a few announcements. We encourage everyone to check out our new Golden Gate Audubon website. I should introduce myself. I'm Pam Young, the Executive Director. Apologies for that. And also watch for CBC updates. And let me just add a note that the circumstances for the different counties are changing daily. And so the best thing to do is check with our website updates. And there's unfortunately a possibility that we may have to limit this activity to comply with new health guidelines. So please check for those updates. And finally, also, please check out our new partnership for native plants for birds with the CNPS Yerba Buena chapter. It's a really exciting, well-developed program. So tonight's presentation, as I say, is entitled Exploring Culturally Relevant Education and Climate Smart Restoration, presented by 3 professionals from Point Blue. John Parodi is our straw restoration director. Alba K. Estrada Lopez is conservation educator, and Isaiah Thalmeyer is senior project manager. Point Blue Conservation Sciences STRAW program, which stands for Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed, implements community-based restoration projects engaging more than 3,000 students annually in hands-on restoration across California. Since its beginning in 1994, STRAW has restored more than 36 miles of streams and has educated 50,000 students, all free of charge to teachers, thanks to generous support from partners and funders and donors. Normally, I suggest that you all ask questions in the Q&A that we will address at the end of the presentation. But tonight, I should say, we're going to make it more interactive, and our panelists welcome your questions during their presentation. So feel free to participate, and I, as the moderator, will promise to do my best to make sure that you have that opportunity to engage the presenters during the actual presentation. So thanks so much. I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to our panelists.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you all for being with us this evening. I'm just going to go ahead and share our screens. And y'all saw the process for that. So I think it's going to be great. So I'll just begin sharing screen right now. And my fellow panelists can let me know if anything is looking odd in our end. All right, seeing some thumbs up. So I know we just went over this like a little ago, but just in case you're not sure if you're in the right virtual room, today we're going to be exploring culturally relevant education and climate smart restorations. Our host did a lovely introduction of us, so we'll just go ahead and skip that. And before we go into the actual content of our presentation, we want to do a land acknowledgement. And if you're not familiar with land acknowledgements, they're really a practice of gratitude. So first and foremost, unless we're indigenous to the land that we are in, we're in a continuous state of settler colonialism. So we're a little limited as to how we can change that identity of a settler, but we can still show allyship and solidarity by doing a land acknowledgement. So I want to show my gratitude to the original stewards of this land, which were the Coast Miwok and the Southern Pomo, and that are still federally recognized today as the Great in Rancheria. So to them, I show gratitude for their stewardship and their continuous presence. So with that in mind, I'm gonna kick it off to John, who will help further orient us what we're gonna be talking about tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Alba.
Yeah.
And hello, everybody. Thanks for spending time with us this evening. And just a quick apology in advance if you hear some small children running behind in the background. I'm sorry about that in advance. So, but to kick us off today or this evening, we're going to be starting off by talking a little bit about the history of our straw program, and in particular to really highlight some of our accomplishments, but more importantly, acknowledge that it's a starting point in our journey as a program, ensuring that we're really relevant and adapting to all the different needs of our communities around the Bay Area. From that quick introduction, we're going to spend the bulk of our time exploring our approach to restoration through the lens of climate change, as well as exploring our approach to ensuring that the environmental education piece of what we do at STRAW is relevant and approachable and accessible to all the communities that we serve. So with that, next slide, please. Awesome, thank you. So to kick this off though, before we get into some details, we'd like to share right out the gate that we believe habitat restoration is an incredibly powerful tool to keep our communities and help them stay resilient. Agricultural communities, urban communities, all communities benefit from healthy landscapes. And just so people that are not familiar with STRAW are clear, we in particular on the restoration side of things focus on working with native plants to build new habitat, to enhance existing habitat, and to extend habitat corridors for wildlife. And we just know it works. So I know all of you are big fans of observing wildlife and birds, and healthy habitat is where all the good birding happens, right? And we have lots of examples from when we take a situation that was lacking habitat and now has wonderful diverse habitat, it really shows. In addition to the habitat for wildlife, benefits to water quality, preserving pasture for agricultural operations, cleaning water for urban communities, helping pollinators, the list goes on and on, the benefits of restoration. And the next slide. This one is particularly fun. This is looking at the change in bird species, both numbers of species and abundance of species over time with restorations. And so this map is, or I'm sorry, this graph is a composite of a bunch of our sites in West Marin and West Sonoma counties, all aggregated together. And the trajectory is really clear. Birds in particular, and especially are great indicators for overall health, really jump when restoration is growing and thriving. It doesn't take that long, which is pretty awesome about it too. So the benefits are there. Okay, thank you. So here we go. We are gonna take a moment and check out this creature right here. And before we talk a little more about it, just wanted to share that although I just was talking how wonderful restoration is, and it is, STRAW didn't start because of restoration specifically. It really started because of our community's desire to be involved in restoration and to take an active role in helping and having ownership over the health of their landscape. And in our case in particular, it wasn't even adults. It was specifically fourth grade students out of a school in San Anselmo, California. So fourth graders, they really kicked this all off for all of us. But real quick, does anybody know what this creature is? And in webinar mode, I'm not sure, do we have a chat in webinar mode? That's a new one to me.
We do have Q&A as well as chat. So we welcome participants to give their answers and their best guesses.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Does anybody have an idea? Fairy shrimp, good guess. It's definitely a shrimp. On the right track. Okay, give one more, maybe a couple more seconds, and then I'll go for it. Okay, so you're definitely on the right track. This is the California freshwater shrimp. So this is a shrimp that is currently endemic to known in 22 streams in the entire world, all of which are in the northern San Francisco Bay Area. It's extremely endangered, really cool history. It's been around since dinosaurs, was a very important food source, both for wildlife, but for Indian people living around the Bay Area. And it's currently, again, heavily endangered and really needs help. And in particular, habitat. Primary reason for its being so heavily endangered is a loss of habitat, as it's, unfortunately, as cool as they are, they're not the best swimmers. And without lots of branches and trees and vegetation hanging over the streams, when our winter rains come and our rivers swell up, they get washed out unless they have good places to hold on to and hide. But so this unlikely creature formed this partnership. And especially at the time, this was in 1992, a very unique partnership. It was a partnership between agricultural communities in West Sonoma County and suburban communities in Marin County. And really why this connection happened was because the work began focusing on work itself and being really inclusive and responsive to the needs of the peoples in these communities, the primary stakeholders, and all these wonderful partners that were excited to see this happen. So it happened in the beginning with an agricultural family, a suburban school, a professional restoration design build firm, and local resource conservation districts and NRCS. So next slide. And not surprisingly or surprisingly, it really took off after that. This connection of people that weren't typically working together and really focusing on shared goals as opposed to focusing on individual opinions over the environment or agriculture, and just working hard together to get work done. The program really grew off to where we are today. And Alba was mentioning earlier, which we all are really fortunate because really motivated fourth graders gave us our jobs almost 30 years later. It's still going. So thank you, fourth graders. Bay Area innovation at its best. And so beyond how this started, the partnerships are huge. And as we grew into new geographies and new places with our STRAW program to where we are now, the kinds of partners grew. So these slides here are just some of our, just fun partners, just to remind us. Bottom left is Nancy Scolari from the Marin Resource Conservation Districts. So we work really closely with resource conservation districts, who are wonderful, wonderful agencies that really work hard to improve the environmental and livelihood of agricultural families all around California and beyond. They're a direct local voice for NRCS, and we're born out of the Dust Bowl. Above Nancy on the top left is Mr. Harold Appleton from Pernesky Chatham. He's one of our main designers for all of the different projects we do around Northern California. We refer to him as the Yoda of restoration because he's incredible. And all of our projects are done professionally. So we bring that really professional voice into the work. In the middle is a woman, Liz Lewis, who is a watershed steward for Marin County Public Works. So as we grew beyond agricultural communities and into more urban and suburban communities, started working more closely with different agencies, flood control agencies, public work agencies. And then on the right is Giselle Block from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And we also started to grow into new habitat types and new types of partners. But one thing I just want to pause here, as I was mentioning, starting with our history, even though our partnerships grew, it's still a very particular and focused group of people that we have in conservation. And we'll say more about that later. But at the time, it was really focused on individual families, different government agencies, and professional restoration experts. So it's a really small slice of representing our communities as a whole. So we'll say a little bit more of that as we keep going. And so just here quickly is what we do. And just wanted to share this here because it really is a kind of an amalgam of the different needs of all of our different partners. We serve this role after so much work together and kind of hearing needs and sharing goals and sharing hopes for our communities. Is we handle a lot of restoration work for our partners, planting plants, erosion control with plants, managing invasive plants, and then community engagement, which is a huge hallmark piece of what we do. And so we provide that for partners as well, who otherwise don't have the capacity to do that. And just starting out when there was, Lorette Rogers, our founder and close workmate with all of us still, and her fourth graders has grown into a large team now with staff serving all kinds of different roles. And the really cool and humbling part about it is the need and interest has grown as we face different environmental challenges. involving community in really professional, strong, and successful restorations projects is a powerful tool. And it's been really humbling and gratifying to see so much interest. Okay. So just pausing for a second, we shared a little bit about our history, and we know our process is effective. We know it's powerful and hopeful. We have this proof of concept and we know it works. But an important thing to share here as we're moving forward is this is just a snapshot of our history. It's kind of the resulting structure we are at now from the history of, of all the different partners and communities we work with. But one of the amazing things about working with young people is their incredible curiosity and determination and fresh perspectives that constantly keep us on our toes. And they always challenge us to learn and evaluate our accomplishments. And what we're really going to focus on for the rest of tonight is that, as we all know, new and critical and essential knowledge and awarenesses have surfaced since our inception, coming up on 30 years. We're a product of our time, but we're constantly evolving. And one clear learning in our process is that we have a lot more voices that need to be included in the conservation movement. As currently now, so much of the conservation movement, along with our history as well, has been primarily driven by people of affluence and people from white European backgrounds. And so there are so many more voices that are currently missing still. And another huge piece of information that was not really on the radar of restoration when we started is climate change. It's a complete game changer for how we approach restoration so they're successful not only for wildlife and people now, but in the future. So to get going, to address these questions, to keep evolving in with our communities and with our work, we began tackling two new edges that really fall within our wheelhouse of doing restoration and working with students in education. We feel that diving in and getting to work on new projects from the bottom up always, at least in the past, has led us to developing more inclusive partnerships in the process as well. So for example, this question of education and reaching new communities. Does our education work actually represent all the voices of the learner communities we serve? Considering our history and the history of conservation in general operates from a predominantly privileged and white perspective. And on the ground, do our restoration practices include the impacts of climate change? If not, what can we do from our corner of restoration practice space to accommodate this knowledge? And are effective projects reaching all of the communities that we serve? So we just got at it. We started rolling our sleeves up and moving on this work and seeing what we can discover and learn and grow together as a program. So first, I'll hand you off to Isaiah, who'll talk about the impacts to our projects and communities on the ground with the reference and perspective of climate change. So thank you.
We'll do the little screen share do-si-do now. Hold tight for a second. And I think you might have to stop the screen share in order to allow me to.
Do you want to keep it, Isaiah, so you can see your notes while you're talking? And have Alba do it?
I think Alba's currently sharing.
I stopped sharing.
And I'm happy. Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. I can go either way, but I'll just do this screen share quick.
Sounds good.
Thanks, y'all. And here we are. Excellent. All right. So it's my pleasure to get to share with you all tonight a little bit about our approach to restoration given the context of climate change. And to give us some context to kind of center us on where we're at today, I'd like to explore that context of climate change. I realize, this might be old news for some of you. Likely a lot of us here are, avid consumers of environmental news, and climate change is certainly a hot topic these days. So this may not be new to you. But still, this kind of trajectory, this place that we're in today is quite important for the work that we're doing now and in the future. So what we're looking at is a graph of the projected number of heat days for a location. This happens to be Larkspur, California, and comparing historic conditions to what the future might hold. And graphs like this exist for all kinds of climate parameters, right? You've maybe seen one for temperature. Precipitation is a little bit more variable, but the idea with all these is that the trajectory is up, right? The future looks quite different than the past has. And in this case, for extreme heat days, which are incredibly impactful for plants, which we care a lot about, of course, but also for people, the future looks quite dire. In this case, expanding from 4 extreme heat days up to 100, which is quite significant. And I'm sure many of us, around the Bay Area can attest to this with some firsthand experience from even just this last summer, right? This was quite a hot year and a lot of days that were over our normal heat index. So we're already experiencing these changes, right? But of course, climate change is not just about temperature. It for a long time had the misnomer of global warming, but so much more is going on. And one of those factors is sea level rise, which of course is connected to temperature and melting ice caps, expanding water molecules. But for us who live around San Francisco Bay, and for the 3 billion people worldwide who live on the coast, sea level rise is a major impact and will continue to be. And the projections there are also pretty extreme. Anywhere from a few inches to 24 inches of sea level rise by 2050. So, not much more than a generation or two away. We could be seeing several more feet of water on our flood tides. And that alone, of course, is problematic. But when you combine that with annual flooding, we get the potential for some pretty severe coastal flooding. And so what you see here is a picture of a restoration site in the North San Francisco Bay where we've worked, and adjacent agricultural infrastructure. This is also near Highway 37. And in different scenarios, we see all that landscape fully inundated. Well, kind of looking across a whole bunch of different climate factors, summarizing them for our region, what we see is more extreme weather. And that will come in the form of heat waves, storms, flooding, and droughts, and wildfires, of course, as we've seen. We'll also likely experience reduced surface water, which is so important to California for agriculture and for drinking water in many municipalities too. And that will be due to more evaporation and changes in dam operations. And that, of course, could lead to increases in groundwater demand as our surface water evaporates. It could also lead to strange things like salinity intrusion and infiltration, which is an issue that some communities in Sonoma Valley and places near Point Reyes Station where I live are experiencing already. Other impacts we know are coming and are already happening include increased stream temperatures, and that's of course related to rising temperatures, but also the removal of vegetation, and that has major impacts for wildlife. All kinds of critters that use those as corridors, as thermal refugia during those heat waves, and especially for us, our salmonids, which can't, of course, spawn unless they have that nice cool water temperature. We talked about rising sea levels. Reduced air quality is another projected impact. We've, I think, probably all been experiencing that pretty seriously for several years now. And yeah, I can attest to how interrupting that can be to the daily life, right? Just trying to do anything when the index is like in the purple and all that. It's pretty terrible out there, right? So we see a lot of impacts and we're experiencing them already. And one of the things that, that I think about as far as like impacts like this is it's easier to cope when you know that the global community is facing them too, right? It's shared suffering and camaraderie that comes out of that. But one thing that we know about climate change is that while it will impact all of us, the way it impacts all of us is not going to be equal. So the UN's Department of Economics and Social Affairs released a really comprehensive report in 2017 highlighting these inequities. And in their words, inequity exerts the disproportionate effects of climate change, and through 3 channels mainly: increased exposure of disadvantaged groups to climate change, increased susceptibility to damages, and also decreased ability to cope with these. So while we know that climate change is affecting all of us, we also know that it's not affecting all of us in the same way, and that's really important. So let's explore how some of these trends play out on a global scale, a national scale, and then also regionally. So looking globally, compare countries and their GDPs, their relative income levels, what we see is that countries with less income, smaller GDPs, are expending more of that to cope with climate change. The cost of dealing with these damages is severe, and in some cases rises as high as 5% of GDP. So pretty clear inequity in how countries are able to cope with this based on how economically prosperous they are. Going more nationally, you guys, you might know that 2020 was, the worst hurricane season on record. what is normally a 5 or 6 or so named storm hurricane season is currently up to 25 named storms, I believe. It's a really significant increase in severe storms. And of course, this trend has been happening for a while, long enough that we can now look back and see what the impacts of some of these climate change related severe hurricanes are over the long term, places like Sandy and New Orleans, where Katrina happened. And what we see is that after storms like this, communities aren't able to respond the same way, right? The impacts of these storms affect communities of color more than other communities. And New Orleans is a great example of that, where responding from the impacts of Hurricane Katrina, which, New Orleans was historically an incredibly ethnically and culturally diverse and economically diverse city. And what we see after the fact is that African-American populations weren't able to rebound as quickly as other populations. And specifically middle-class African-Americans never came back to the city at the same rates that other people did. So fundamentally changed the makeup of that city due to just a single climate change driven event. Now, if we bring it back to our state here in California, we were talking about heat waves before, and these graphs show the relative heat wave mortality rates for different ethnic groups in the past and also projected into the future based on a few different climate scenarios, kind of like a good case scenario, low emissions, and then more of a dire high emissions scenario. And what we see is that mortality rates increase for everybody, right? But they don't increase equally for everyone. African Americans especially, the rate of mortality is projected to increase much faster than anyone else. So again, just unequal impacts of these climate change effects on communities of color and disadvantaged communities. So bringing it back to restoration, as John mentioned, we know that this works, especially in the context of environmental issues. We have awesome proof of concept in the response of indicator species like birds, the ability of restoration to clean water and provide habitat for wildlife. But what we also now know is that habitat restoration, ecological restoration, is an incredibly effective tool at addressing social inequities as well. And so there's groups globally who have identified restoration as a key tool for how we'll adapt to climate change in the future. And there's major initiatives underway, including the Bond Challenge and the UN's Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, which are both major initiatives globally that hope to increase the rate of restoration so that we can sequester more carbon in woody plants and start to turn the tide on this. So bringing it back to Point Blue and our work, knowing that so much restoration is, obviously already underway with what we do, but also coming down the pipeline, and that the need for it, not only for environments, but for people, is more dire than ever. We really felt pressed to come up with a way to incorporate climate change into our restoration projects, because of course, all those changes affect the plants that we're hoping to establish out there too. And so what we came up with is a working definition for climate smart ecological restoration, which is the process of enhancing ecological function of degraded or destroyed areas in a manner that makes them more resilient to the consequences of climate change. So you might hear that and might kind of wonder where the human community aspect of that comes in, right? It sounds kind of sciencey, nature focused. But I want to call it ecological function, because remember, those are the functions that we rely on as humans, that really all organisms rely on for their life. So I'm talking about things like clean water, clean air. So when we restore these ecological functions, of course, we all benefit from them. And if we can establish these restoration projects and make sure that they survive into the future, regardless of what the climate is, and we'll ensure that those ecological functions persist. So from that high level definition, what we've done is a whole number of steps. First of all, creating a list of 7 climate smart restoration principles that are intended to be applicable to any kind of project, doesn't even have to be restoration. And the goal is to help to address and bring climate change into whatever you're planning or creating. And they're kind of awesome in that they're very open-ended. We've tested them a bunch now on different initiatives and efforts, and they totally work. And unfortunately, we don't have time today to go into all of them, but let's explore 2 together. First of all, this idea of building ecological insurance and redundancy. So that's actually a design concept, redundancy. And a good way to think about it might be, for me at least, is like thinking about an airplane. If you think about an airplane, It's got 2 wings. It's got at least probably 2 engines, maybe 4 on those wings. And if one of those engines craps out for some reason, that plane is still going to be able to fly and land, right? Because it has multiple engines, that redundancy of that important function. So we can apply that same concept to restoration. And we know that plants, they provide key benefits, either in the way that they provide resources to wildlife and or in their ability to cope with future change. So what we can do then is map out those key characteristics, identify what they are, which is what you see in those columns, and then evaluate our native plant species to see who has that. And then when we're designing a project, we'll select species and make sure that we have multiple species that provide those important benefits. So there's that redundancy, right? Therefore being, if for some reason one or several of those species don't survive because of future conditions, then something else is there to fill that important niche. And we can even expand that idea of redundancy beyond, say, just key characteristics and benefits to wildlife, and think about what these plants can survive and tolerate. And we can do some cool science here, evaluating the range of tolerances to these individual species based on where they live now and the conditions there. And if we can identify what that range of tolerances is, then we can compare it to the future projected climates of our restoration sites and see if those plants that we like to use are likely to be able to survive that projected future. And in doing so, again, we make sure that we include multiple species, a redundancy of species that are able to tolerate those future conditions. So both of these tools that I just showed you are tools that we developed and are free and available on Point Blue's website. And the idea here being that we really wanted to make this information more accessible, both to folks like us, say, who might be doing restoration and trying to find new ways to incorporate climate change planning into their designs, but also for students or for landowners or for folks like you in the public who might just want to learn more about what one could do to incorporate climate change planning into projects like this. So the idea here is increasing accessibility. But also, we want to recognize that this is still deeply rooted in science, which is by nature not accessible. It has a history of inaccessibility and elitism, in fact, in some cases. So these tools can't just stand alone. In fact, we need all these principles working together in order to have a really holistic approach that addresses both environmental and social injustices. And so another super key principle here is including the human community. And in a second, I'll hand it off to Alba to share some awesome examples of what that actually looks like. But just as kind of a fun primer, we'll hear some really fun photos of the great kids we get to work with in a normal year, I'll say, on a regular basis. But the reason that we might do this is really rooted in the idea of action and awareness. So, we hope that someday, all of us might make some choices to help make the world a better place. But in order to do that, you have to be aware of those choices in the first place and the options. And so we really aim to include young people in order to give them these experiences. And we recognize that these are often things that can't be learned, at least by everyone in a classroom setting. The ability to get your hands in the mud, to see it in action is critical, especially for different types of learners. And so we believe that by making this information accessible to all, we can equip our future workforce to help cope with climate change through restoration, but we can also just make and hopefully contribute to an informed society who can make their own choice for their futures and for their careers. And so I'll leave you with that and pass it off to Alba now. Thank you.
Thanks, Isaiah. So we could go to the next slide. That'd be awesome. So the same scientific rigor that we implement to our restoration sites is hopefully the same rigor we're implementing in order to engage our students in the environmental ed that we provide to them. And we try to do this through culturally relevant teaching. And I know y'all have probably heard that buzzword or literally in the title of our presentation today. And the thing about culturally relevant education, Geneva Gay has this wonderful definition of it, but there's not really one type of culturally relevant teaching, just like there is no one amazing plant palette for all restoration sites, right? You have to take into consideration all these different factors. So instead, you can think about it more like a lens, a tool. It's a way of not seeing those lived experiences our students have as barriers to their understanding, but instead, we use those as tool of connection and really to connect to those underlying values that we all have. And this sounds really abstract, but we're about to give you a little bit of more concrete examples that we do here at STRAW. We could go to the next slide. And often when people think of culturally relevant education, the first barrier that they perceive is language. And it's a really important one. It can ostracize students, and at the same time, it could be such a tool of connection, right? And within STRAW, we provide bilingual education, and also, like to the image to the right, we also provide full Spanish lessons. And we could do a whole seminar on bilingual education. You could get your whole PhD, but the big takeaway that I want y'all to get from this is that I have yet to have an experience with a classroom or a group of students where they don't appreciate the effort, because students really want to learn. They want to be able to participate. And what do we need to do to make that happen? And often that starts with being fluent in the student's most fluent language. And this is also where it's highlighted how much cultural representation in educators is important, but even more so in scientists. And if we could go to the next slide. So language is a really important one, but also is embracing these really diverse learning behaviors that students have. And in these three images, these were 3 different students, and they all received more or less the same lesson. And we had one student who created the best portrait of me that will ever exist. Didn't take any notes. We had one student who scribbled, and we had this amazing student to the right who wrote nothing, right? He was cracking jokes. And at the same time, when we went outside of their classroom and I asked them to build me a model of a riparian system, all 3 of them were able to create the different characteristics of these ecosystems. So we don't really expect adults to be excellent at every part of their lives. So why do we expect students to be extraordinary at all parts of a lesson, right? What does it look like to embrace however these students are learning and really ingesting the information that we're sharing with them, not having only one sole metric? And if we could go to the next one, moving beyond the classroom, the really cool, unique part of STRAW is that we go to active restoration sites. And when we go to these active restoration sites, often students bring an adult with them, and we call these chaperone circles. And I also want to uplift that the use of chaperone is really intentional. And the reason for that is because not all students have the adult in their life be their biological parent or even a parent as a model, but all students have hopefully adults that do serve that role of caring and guiding for them. So we call these chaperone circles to try to be as inclusive of the different family units that students are bringing into these spaces. And really, this is an intergenerational approach that we hope we're doing. When we get into these chaperone circles, that could also be bilingual and in Spanish, we ask beforehand. We give the lowdown of what students learned in the classroom, but then we also really encourage and emphasize to the chaperone that their role today is as supporters and as enablers of their students' curiosity. Because if students want to go wander for 10 minutes and build a worm refuge or a little pool for all the worms that they're finding, go let them do that, because when they come back, they'll be able to do the work. And that's also something that we really emphasize to our chaperones. The work that we are giving students, we know they can do it. So we need to be able to support our students instead of limiting them and making these assumptions as to what they can and they can't do. And even more so than that, our ultimate goal with this is that hopefully we're creating a more holistic home where these students are able to go back to a more environmentally conscious space. And this is not to say at all that there's not already environmental efforts within their homes. This is just an additional layer in the context of restoration, right? And if you could go to the next slide, mostly we focus on K through 12 students throughout the academic school year. And we also were reflecting that we were not engaging with the student demographic. Specifically, we weren't engaging with community college students, and at that, community college students of color. And this lack of racial diversity is very much documented in different research reports. I'm going to pull just from this one by Dr. Jacida E. Taylor. Definitely recommend you to check out Green 2.0 report if you're not familiar with it already. And from this quote, I really want to just emphasize this area where it says people of color poll higher than whites in support for environmental issues. Again, people of color poll higher than whites in support for environmental issues. And yet, when you think of the mainstream brand of environmentalist, often the associations is that of whiteness and recreation, right? And that is not the true. As Isaiah kind of gave us this really fuller context, people of color are the ones that are going to be the most impacted, the most severely impacted by climate change. So if we could go to the next slide. Within that same report, she produces the information, the graph that's about to come out here. And here I want you to focus on the dark figurines here. And as you go from left to right, you're kind of going up the leadership pole here. And we know that that people of color in the US are about 36% of the population, but when you go into the STEM workforce, they're no more than 29%. And then when you go into the environmental organizations, they don't make up more than 16% of the staff. And as you go up the leadership pole, that representation of people of color continues to dwindle. So our own internship design really focuses on increasing access to students who may have significant barriers, because we really need to break that green ceiling, as it's been called. We need to break that 60% only of representation in these environmental organizations. We go to the next slide. So we knew that we wanted to work with people of color because it was very important to increase the racial diversity in the predominantly white space that is the environmental field. And we wanted to work with community college students because there is a huge amount of undergraduate students that pursue the community college route. And the reason for that can be several, but top of my head, the ones that come to mind always is that geographically, it's more accessible. It's in literal closer proximity to these students' homes. Financially, it's more accessible. And then also culturally, many students have yet to live outside of their communities, outside of the support that their community provides, and they're expected to go to four-year institutions, right? So the access to community college students really enables this greater diversity of students. And there has been a whole lot of different studies, but around 2/3 of community college students are people of color and or of low socioeconomic status. So we see this as an opportunity to really engage students early on in their career exploration. And if you go to the next slide, please. So when we work with community college students, I won't make y'all read all of these goals, but ultimately the mission of this type of internship is that we want to see more Black, Indigenous, and people of color as environmentalists who really believe and know that they have agency to impact their environments and the community that they are a part of. And the way that we were able to do this these past couple of summers has been through this type of internship structure. We could go to the next slide. So if you didn't know, we're currently in a pandemic. So because of that, there were certain field components that we weren't able to have our students participate in. But even with that in mind, we had a virtual internship this year that was stipend, and it was once a week, about 2 hours. And even though I said it wasn't homework, it was pretty much homework, and where I asked them to do about an hour of like pre-readings or just content analysis. And then we would come back and we would talk about it within the seminar day. And the actual content or flow of those seminar days, and we could go to the next slide, really had two components. And within them, it was an ecological subject intro. So we usually think of like your 101s, Restoration 101 or Ethology 101, and of an interpersonal skill development or environmental justice issue. And we opened and we ended with some type of check-in or some type of checkout. And that was really intentional because it was really important to foster some sense of belonging, even though of course there were challenges because everyone was a little square in Zoom. But even then, the community that students were able to foster was really significant. And it's still visible now in the type of networking that's happening, even though the internship has concluded a couple of months from now, actually. And we could go to the next slide. This is just a really brief example of how we were able to incorporate these two different components in a way that was complementary, and it actually helped deepen the understandings for a lot of these students. So just a quick example is if we were talking about indicator species like birds, we talked about the basics of bird migration, right? And how climate change would impact them. And at the same time, we talked about what is the impact of human migration in context of climate change. These are very much different facets of the same coin, right? So within that, in order for students to even have access to this type of information, we did a lot of different intentional efforts to increase access. So if we could go to the next slide. From this next slide, I really just want to highlight these two different ones, and where any presenter that was going to share with our students, the facilitators, usually myself, would meet with them beforehand to make sure that any information that they were sharing with the students was really foundational. We really tried to avoid any jargon that we weren't going to be able to explain at the time. And that is not to say that we didn't think students were capable. Instead, we thought, what are these foundational concepts, these definitions, these words that students will find accessible so they themselves can chip at whatever passion is kind of inkling. And then additionally, we had a mentorship component. All of the students that we had this past summer, this was the first mentor that they had. So that was really important for students to leave this internship experience with some type of reference as to what it means to have someone who is your guide, who is your advocate. And with that in mind, the actual makeup of our cohort of students were all people who identified as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And that is really important because it's almost a myth that there are no qualified people of color for these internships or for these different opportunities with the environmental field. And yet I found 19 community college students all very much interested in learning about this field. And at the same time, we want to acknowledge that although our cohort was all BIPOC, all Black, Indigenous, and people of color, this is still not necessarily representative of the racial demographics found in the Bay Area. And if we could go to the next slide, also our cohort was mostly women of color. And that is still not necessarily representative of all the genders that are present within the Bay Area. So we know that that's an area of growth for us. But even with that in mind, the students' feedback was overwhelmingly positive. And we had different types of assessments. Some were weekly, and of course we had a more in-depth one at the end of the program. But we asked this question of how did this experience really influence the students' career aspirations? And at the beginning, we had about half of the students that were thinking, yes, this is the field that I want to go into. We had about a quarter who said, I'm kind of considering it. And then we had a little bit over a quarter who said, no, thank you, but I kind of still want to learn about it. And at the end of the program, most of the students were pretty sure that they wanted to go into an environmental career. We actually had one student even change their major. And then we had around 2 students who were still inclined to go into, and we actually had one student who still very much saw themselves as an environmentalist, even though they were going to pursue a career in rangeland as a veteran, as a veterinarian, not a veteran. And then we could go to the last slide, please. So this culturally relevant teaching practice is very much a practice. You have to keep chipping at it, right? And it's a skill and you continue to develop. There's no type of one culturally relevant teaching. If you leave with any type of takeaway, it's that you have to keep altering it and keep making analysis of the environment and the people that are within this environment. At the same time, there's a couple of questions that can help with this lens or with this practice. So I know I can't see you all, which is shameful, but also I will take your word on it. If you could all just straighten up wherever you're at and maybe take 2 deep breaths, and especially because I can't see you, maybe you want to close your eyes and take one last deep breath in. And in that moment, I want you to think about a time, it could have been recent or in the past, and where you were trying to communicate something with someone. And it could be maybe someone who was younger or a coworker, maybe even your significant other or some type of partner. And hold on to that moment. And then I want y'all to ask yourselves these questions. Do I understand this person's needs and what they want to learn? What do I know about their background and their community? Did I make any assumptions about that? Did I make no assumptions because I never even asked or researched it myself? And how do I center their learning experience to better communicate? How do I focus their needs in order to be able to have this conversation? So take 2 deep breaths. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to the room. So thank you all for participating in that. That was an exercise of practicing culturally relevant teaching. You did it. It only took an hour. There you go. And this type of teaching method is really just a practice of connecting to other people's deeper values and needs in order to communicate with them and with each other. And this could be in a teacher-student relationship, but regardless if you're considering teaching as part of your career or even part of your profession, we can all really benefit from fully seeing each other. Because when we fully see each other, that's really where that growth and that progress occurs, right? And that's really when we can begin to self-reflect and really allow for that progress to happen. So with that in mind and that look to the future, I'm going to pass it on to John to close us off.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alba. Yeah, so sweet. So just to kind of close us here, just first want to thank Alba and Isaiah for sharing our current working edges, what we're really focusing on right now. But that being said, I also want to acknowledge that although we've made lots of progress with regards to authentic and inclusive education and our project Resilience to Climate Change, there's still a lot of work to do to move restoration and conservation from the unintentional but elite, privileged, and white European space, a space that allowed our program to grow and thrive, to become truly inclusive process for all our communities. We have, of course, worked intermittently with other groups and other voices in our projects, kind of project by project, tribal groups, community advocacy groups, etc. That all being said, they've been individual situations and don't feel that they're truly and authentically represented into our whole fabric of the work that we do and the conservation movement in general. But that being said, I think the underpinnings of what Alba described on how we try to work, combining that with the curiosity and acceptance that children are constantly teaching us, that's a necessary and powerful way to make this shift happen. And in addition to that, in our experience, small and inclusive steps, moving at the speed of trust, create the durable partnerships necessary for our success. So as we're reflecting as a program moving forward, if we can hope and hold and follow these models and these practices, it not only keeps us relevant, keeps us moving forward and keeping us adapting to changes and needs on the ground, we can do our part to make restoration and conservation completely accessible to all the communities that we serve in the Bay Area and beyond. So with that, thank you everyone for your time and spending Thursday evening with us. And I think that's what we got.
Well, thank you very much, John. That was really fantastic. I took some notes, and I tell you, I was honestly very inspired with the concept of culturally relevant teaching and centering their experience. That's really inspiring as someone who has worked with children and tried to help on environmental issues pretty much my entire adult life. And we do have a much smaller program than what you have. I'm so impressed at the breadth and scope of how much you've accomplished. And we may have some questions. Let me see who is asking some questions here. So far, our viewers are just thanking you, saying thank you very much. It's really a beautiful presentation. And maybe you can let us know how we could get more information. You mentioned Point Blue, but maybe you can say more about how to connect and have follow-up questions to your website.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So I think probably the best step is, definitely pointblue.org has got a lot of information about the breadth of work we do at Point Blue. And pointblue.org/straw gets directly to our program in particular, and there's contact information on there. I believe currently Lorette Rogers, our program founder, is the initial contact, and she can get anyone to where they need to go as far as next steps. Happy to share my contact as well. It's jparodi@pointblue.org. And I'd love to connect and see if we can help anybody out, do some work together.
So are you ready for a hard question? Do you feel like a hard question?
Sure.
Yeah. So one of our challenges is we consider ourselves a field-based organization. We take people on field trips. Well, we can't do any field trips right now. So how are you coping with that, with your really exciting outdoor education programs? How are you, as we say, pivoting?
Yeah, I could take a lead on this one. So, although we are very much a community-powered restoration program, we're aware that we work with young people and at large volumes. At times, we've had 3 classrooms and apart from staff, so that quickly adds up to 80 people. So, with that in mind, we are still trying to provide some type of environmental education, and very much so, like many schools around here, where we're trying to figure out what does it look like to have a virtual field trip, or what does it look like to maybe have students grow their own plants, and we can help guide that scientific process. So we're still keeping the students in mind with, again, thinking about culturally relevant education is part of their needs really right now, understanding the science, and it could be, right? But that is part of our logic. And we're still trying to engage with students, but we most definitely will not be working with them in such large volumes that we usually do, at least this summer. And then really quickly, there's a question in the chat box of, do you include art in your program? Yeah. And we do, which is really nice. When we do restoration sites, depending on the volume of the day, we'll have a couple of students take breaks, and then in that break we'll ask them to draw, what do you think this restoration site is going to look like? Or even when they're doing notes in their lessons, we say like, well, maybe you want to draw out what that site is going to look like. So we do see art as a tool to help students understand. We don't give art lessons per se, but we do provide crayons. So how about that?
Yeah, one piece to add to that, thank you, Alba. One piece we didn't mention tonight is we spend a lot of effort with our group of teachers, our network of teachers, and professional development for them. And a real frequent activity we do each year, we have what we call Watershed Week, which is a 3-day workshop for our teachers, and the subjects change and evolve year to year depending on teacher interests and current events, etc. But there is always an art component to that as well, both for the teachers' experience to kind of nurture their time and space in the very special summertime that teachers are giving up for us when they spend the 3 days with us. But also a lot of time it's with artists who are skilled at training teachers in how to bring that techniques to their classrooms as well. So, and that's I appreciate that question, because as Alba mentioned earlier, a really important process for some learners, right? To do it visually and do it through creative ways like that. And it's important to include that. Thank you.
I'll chime in with just a couple more things. I got to get my 2 cents in too, which is just to mention, I don't think we have yet tonight that all of these opportunities that we offer to students and teachers are free. And that's, of course, thanks to the support from all kinds of different folks. But that's important, especially, to consider in the context of professional development, things that often teachers and professionals, like you and I often have to pay for. So another example of the culturally relevant teaching practices that Alba so awesomely modeled for us in the context of how we work with teachers this strange year is that, rather than kind of prescribing what we think teachers might need, is we started by asking them. We sent out a survey to get an idea of what the varied needs are across our network of teachers. And we heard a lot of things back, but one of the things that we heard loud and clear was that we're pretty burnt out on screens. And so, that makes our options a little bit more interesting and limited. So we're still, as Alba and John was saying, figuring out ways to engage with students, but we're hearing loud and clear that doing it over Zoom or screens might not be the best way to do it this year.
Well, that's valid. I know we have a similar challenge, you know, how much can we translate what we do in the field to, as you said, you know, something out of a little box in a room. So it is a challenge. And the other thing we've been curious about maybe exploring is self-guided activities where, as you said, you have a mentor, and maybe there could even be, with a little technology, a little connection with your personal favorite mentor when you're out in the field. That would be fun. Maybe technology will permit that somehow, sometime soon. Well, thank you all very much. I'm looking for more questions, and I thought it was really fun to just let people ask questions during your presentation. And we'll have this recording available. And if to all the viewers and supporters, if you're interested in following up, we sure encourage you to go to the Point Blue website. Wonderful things are happening there, and we're so pleased that you could share time with us tonight. It was really, really very inspiring.
Thanks, Pam. There is
Of course,
one more
thank you so
question.
much.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah.
30
Go
seconds,
ahead.
just to make sure. Hopefully Beth Tepper is still on. But we, as Pam was saying, for all its drawbacks, we were actually able to engage with different, like, geographically places that we otherwise would not have. So we are looking for more East Bay Community College students, and we actually had a lot of our students be from the East Bay this past summer. And we're also looking to begin servicing students in more of the South Bay area as well. And I know Merritt College is not one that we have yet to work with, but Peralta is one that I've been able to reach out to a couple of professors who are super excited to advise some students to apply. So I hope that answers your question. I hope you're still on.
That's great. I'm glad you caught that. Well, thank you all so much. It's been a really productive evening. I'm glad our connections worked and our screens worked. And as I say, you know, anyone feel free to reach out to me as well. You can reach me through our Golden Gate website. And I think there's an opportunity for a lot of partnerships here. So we look forward to that as well. I think you're doing some wonderful work. And thanks so much for sharing the evening with us.
Thank you very much. And thanks for all you do as well. Yeah, looking forward to what we can do together.
Terrific. All right. Well, have a good evening and have a good upcoming holiday.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.